Okay, we're going to pivot here and move into the National Aviation Consortium. And Sheree, just note I didn't walk up with a script. So whatever somebody told me to say about you, just kick it out the window. I'm going to go back about 4 years ago, and I had the opportunity and during my, for those of you that know my roots, I sort of am a corporate person that did a time and service at the U.S. Department of Labor that ran employer engagement and a number of initiatives in the last, in the Bush administration around public-private partnerships. And that's only important in the context of I spent a lot of time on the ground with employers trying to figure out how these big public systems could be more responsive. And the thought from a U.S. Department of Labor perspective was, if in fact we can find people jobs, that's a good thing. And in order to find people jobs, we need to understand what the jobs are. Therefore, we need the public sector to understand what they now call demand-driven. And it seemed like really basics when corporate America was paying me, close to $1 million a year in contracts to do exactly that. So I knew that there was a disconnect because when I was in the private sector, it was easier to pay me than it was to go figure it out. And this system of education and job training is, I often refer to it, and I am currently a member of the World Economic Forum and their Global Agenda Council on the future of manufacturing. So I sit at a table of global thought leaders around this issue. And that always humbles me to think if we don't think we have a target on our back, we're kidding us, because every other country is trying to figure out how they make things better than we do. And that's a dynamic that we've just seen shift in my lifetime. Not that there wasn't always global competition, but the discussion about the UAE wanting to build end-to-end planes. Well, I have been in that facility. It's called Strata, and they entered the global value chain in aviation and aerospace at the top. And their intention is to build end-to-end planes by 2030. And I've been through that facility, and they're building the workforce from the ground up. And in fact, they have anchored their workforce development in diversity and women. And in fact, when I first went through the facility several years ago, they were really proud to tell me, because I was probably the only woman there from manufacturing, that 80% of their domestic workforce was female. And the last time I was on a call with the CEO, he was good to correct me that now there were 12 team leads. So it wasn't just that they were moving them into the front line, driving and building their workforce. They equally were promoting them and moving them into management. And you think about that environment of global competition, and it's pretty stiff. And when I was at the U.S. Department of Labor, I had the opportunity to sit on more intergovernmental agencies. In fact, Susan, I think our first engagement was in one of those, can you go solve the aerospace workforce? And there's good documentation going back as far as 2002 with the state of the aerospace industry. And we piloted some models. And what we did know is if you engage employers in meaningful action that drives change, in the end, change happens, because it has to truly be the pull of the partnership at the community level. So when I joined the National Association of Manufacturers and the Manufacturing Institute, I brought with me my passion around the aerospace, aviation, and defense industry, because I knew how critical it was to our national security and to our nation's future. And then they had this funded opportunity out of the U.S. Department of Labor called TAC, and they were going to put a bunch of money, $2 billion, into building capacity at the community level. And I thought, okay, who's going to stand with me? And I strategically approached a number of community colleges. And in fact, in the case of WATC and my first interaction with Sheree, it wasn't with Sheree, it actually first was with her board of directors. And it was Spirit and Textron and a host of other Wichita Area Aerospace. And I walked in my bold self and said, we have an opportunity. And that opportunity is really about how we stop creating islands of excellence and how we start to connect them. And that I have a vision for how we take the best of what has happened across the country and test replication and scalability. Because we're really good at islands of excellence. What we haven't managed to do is get to scale. And I challenged these industry executives who had built this National Center for Aviation Training I looked him in the eye and I said, "So are you national or are you not? Is it about just the community in Wichita, or is it about the vision behind the name on that center?" And they looked me straight in the eye and said, "It's about the nation." And that is the support that stands behind the National Aviation Training Center. And then they subsequently told me we might not invite her back because she's challenged us, but in the end, they agreed to stand with me as a board of directors with community leaders from across the nation, not just Wichita, anchored in Washington, replicated in Oklahoma, North Carolina, and Indiana, to overcome this skills gap and challenge that we were having. And my proud partner in that is going to share the overview. Please join me in welcoming Sheree Utash, the interim president from WATC.
Thank you, Jennifer, very much. And I just really think that we should take a moment and thank the Manufacturing Institute, AIA, and GAMA for this wonderful event and for sponsoring the summit. You know, it's funny, as I was thinking about what to say today, I reflected back on about roughly 4.5 years ago. Once we had the board's support at NCAT in Wichita Area Technical College, we went about the business to put this vision on paper. And there was probably maybe four of us that worked diligently at our full-time jobs and tried to craft this vision between 5 a.m. and 8 a.m. every morning for 6 weeks to develop the grant. And funny, as I was flying yesterday, I thought to myself, you know, we jokingly said, well, we're just going to end this grant with a capstone event with a National Employer Roundtable. Okay. We wrote it in the grant. That's kind of what we did. And it's just absolutely phenomenal to be able to be here today and to be able to have an opportunity to share with you a little bit about what's happened in that grant process and where do we go from here. So I want to spend a little time today talking to you about that. But before I do, I want to thank each of you that are in the audience, because every single one of you, we have community colleges here, we have employers here, we have certification specialists, we have online curriculum developers, we have workforce development agencies, we have consultants and planners and other people that are here. And your dedication and your passion to A, recognizing the problem, and B, being here to be part of the solution is to be highly commended. And so, you know, the first step is just getting a group of people to get on board with what the issue is. So I really appreciate you being here today. Certainly, I'm honored to be able to be here and talk to you about the things that have happened in the grant. But I have there are three things I really want to talk to you about. I think history is kind of important. So I want to just do a brief history of why Wichita. And then I want to talk about the tax grant. And then I want to talk about where we go from here. So before I start talking about our current work, let's talk about Wichita just for a minute and Wichita's role in aviation and where it came from, because I always think it's good to know the history of something. I think it's always good to look back and know what you can learn from that. And I think it's important to have that context as we look to the future. So if you have flown in an airplane, which I'm sure you all have, it was probably either designed or there were parts built in that airplane in Wichita, Kansas. More than 250,000 aircraft have been produced in Wichita since the early 1990s. But what's really important about Wichita is the history in the early 1920s and 30s when these aircraft pioneers, such as Lloyd Stearman, Clyde Cessna, Walter Beach, they created projects very, very early in the aviation industry that created Wichita to be known as the air capital of the world. And I think the other thing that's important is Wichita has made a lot of contributions to the military. So I, in researching this, did not know this, but I wanted to share it with you. I thought it was interesting. During World War II, there were nearly 5 bombers a day produced in Wichita, Kansas. And of the America's B-52 bombers, over half of those were built in Wichita, Kansas. So there were pioneers a long time ago that looked at problems and issues and said, here's how we're going to fix it. In fact, to the point that that's really what separated Clyde Cessna and Walter Beach and what created Cessna and Beach many years ago, which is now Textron Aviation, because of the high wing and the low wing propositions. Today, we have all kinds of companies that are supporting aviation in Wichita still. We have a very, very large supply chain base. We're also home to Bombardier Learjet, Textron Aviation, and certainly Spirit Aerosystems, which is a major supplier for all Boeing jetliners, is in our backyard and is certainly a huge partner with us. Cindy talked a little bit about the National Center for Aviation Training, and I want to talk about that just a minute. So did Jennifer. But you know what? Some of the best things that happen in this world are when people come together as industry and not individual companies. We all just human behavior. We all compete. We're all competitive. We wouldn't be successful if we weren't. But some of the best things that happen is when people come together for the benefit of the industry. And the National Center for Aviation Training was built on that premise. And I think the National Aviation Consortium grant that I'm going to talk about was built on that premise. High-level senior leadership from the aviation industry in Wichita came into rooms, and I always characterize it like this. They walked into this conference room, and before they walked in, they took their corporate hat and coat off, and they put them out in the hallway. And they walked into that room and sat down at that table and said, hey, we've got a problem because we've got a gem in this aviation manufacturing world, and we are going to lose our competitive edge if we don't create a National Center for Aviation Training. And somebody's got to step up and do it. So who's going to do that? And they would go into that room and they would churn. I mean, I was part of some of those meetings. It was incredibly interesting. Some of the most competitive people in the world sitting at that table trying to decide what's the best thing for industry. And so then they would go out and they would put their corporate hat and coat on, and they would get in their cars, and I'm just sure as I can be, that they would drive back to their organizations thinking, okay, what's in it for me and how can I use it? But the thing that was so richly important and the big lesson learned was they came together as an industry to solve a problem or to drive the future. And so NCAT is a crown jewel not only for Wichita, but for our nation and really for the global aviation industry. Many of you maybe have been to NCAT. Who's ever visited the National Center for Aviation Training? Several people. It's a campus of 225,000 square feet of aviation training and research labs, classrooms, and conference facilities. It enables us to train every facet of aircraft manufacturing. So we can go from aircraft design to component manufacturing to building to repair and maintenance, the whole gamut. So we offer certificates and degrees in all those programs, but here's the most important fact, that we're achieving job placement rates in the 90th percentile. We're training people to go to work, and they're getting a high-skilled, high-wage job. But we need more people. We need more people in that pipeline. Everybody's in the same situation. We've heard it over and over this morning. So the other thing that happens at NCAT that's kind of unique, very unique, I think, because I think it might be the only place in the country that has this, is we share lab space with Wichita State University's National Institute for Aviation Research, NIAR. NIAR is the largest public university research organization of its type. And earlier this year, it was cited by the Brookings Institute as one of the major reasons that Wichita ranks among the top 3 metropolitan areas in the country for innovative partnerships between business and industry. Looking at the history, looking at the present, why we're here. So, as I mentioned in the beginning, one of the things I want to talk about is the TAC grant. And we've been involved in this since 2012. WATC was very honored to be the managing partner of this grant. And so there's a short video we want to share with you about the work that we're doing.
Every year, employers in aviation and advanced manufacturing face an ever-increasing workforce skills gap. In just 10 years, 2 million manufacturing jobs will be vacant as a direct result of the skills gap crisis. The National Aviation Consortium, or NAC, was created to close this gap. By focusing on 6 key areas of study, the NAC is using a portable credentials model to create a pathway of real-world education. Combining accelerated online classes and hands-on training, the NAC is rapidly turning students into workforce candidates with in-demand skills. Currently demonstrated in 5 aviation communities across the nation, the NAC model is delivering best-in-class students who are ready to work in as little as 4 to 12 weeks. The NAC, in partnership with the Manufacturing Institute, is providing a free return on investment calculator at costofahire.com to help employers determine how much the skills gap is really costing their business. Through the NAC, employers across the U.S. are finding skilled, qualified workers. Are you ready to strengthen your bottom line? Get engaged at naccareers.com/engage.
So for those of you that may be new to TACT or may not know what it is a program that provides grant dollars from the U.S. Department of Labor. And as I look down here, I think, okay, it all began right there. This whole idea of putting an RFP and getting a $15 million grant to enhance education and career technical training and create programs in less than 2 years where people can be job ready. So the grant really enabled us to create what we've called the National Aviation Consortium. And that consortium is based on 5 colleges across the United States. We have Edmonds Community College in Washington. We have Tulsa Tech in Tulsa, Oklahoma. We have Ivy Tech in Indiana. We have Guilford Technical in North Carolina, and then Wichita Area Technical College in Kansas. So how hard is that? Did we take our competitive hats off and say, okay, let's all work together? And here's what we need to do. We have a goal. We have a target, first of all. We have a target, and that target is that we need to find unemployed or underemployed training eligible workers. Target. What would our goal be with those people? Our goal was to take those program participants and get them into trained and ready to go into a high-wage, high-skilled job. And our focus was in 6 areas of aviation manufacturing. And the 6 areas that we picked were the ones that we schemed and dreamed 4.5 years ago. Did we choose right? Yeah, in some cases I think we did. But the exciting thing is we picked 6. And as I tell my people all the time, we always have to have an eye in the microscope and an eye in the telescope. So as we talk about where we go from here, what are the next 6? What are the next 8? Where do we go? What happens after this? But these 6 that we picked were assembly mechanic, composite technology, tooling, electrical assembly, quality assurance, and CNC machining. And what we did was we tried to create accelerated learning modules with industry-recognized credentials attached so that people were job ready. And we've been very successful in that grant. And the people that have worked very, very diligent and hard from all 5 colleges for a common goal. And that common goal was to try to, reduce this gap that we've been seeing and been talking about. So we've made a little bit of progress. We still got a big gap. You look at 2 million, we're a drop in the bucket. But as of today, we have served over 2,500 students collectively in the consortium. Our original goal was 2,500, so we are going to exceed our goal and actually be posting enrollments for another 6 to 9 months. So we will definitely exceed our goal. Interestingly enough, I asked this morning when I heard about males and females, I asked my team, so what's the breakdown of what we've had? We have had 82 males, 18% female, so we're not there, but we're making a dent, and 11% veterans. So again, we're making a little bit of an inroad into those 2 markets that we talked about. Another good point, another good news of the grant, 50% of those 2,500 are employed. And the majority of the other 50 are continuing their education and training because they might have finished sheet metal and decided they wanted to go to composites, or they might have finished sheet metal and decided they wanted to go to an airframe and power plant program. Whatever that may be, they're continuing. We've completed 500,000 hours of training. We have built this education in portable credentialing, and we've created educational blocks with career pathways. So we have created a sheet metal program, a CNC machining program, all of these 6 basic entry-level skills. And then we've created a map, a roadmap for students where they say, we can go to this level, this level, this level, and ultimately created articulation agreements with 4-year universities where many of their credits will transfer into a baccalaureate degree. Along the way, we've said, you start here at this job, you move to, when you finish this credential, you can go to this job, this job, this job. So we've created a career track in their minds. So it's not a job, it's a career. And we're giving them the ability to see themselves without the big elephant on the table that it takes forever to get there. So that has been a very good thing out of this. We have awarded over 3,000 college credentials. That would be technical certificates and degrees from colleges. We have awarded 1,323 industry recognized credentials. So those are third-party certifications. And the newest one of those we did in a partnership with Certec, and we've created a sheet metal assembly certification with Certec, and Steve Kane is here. And I can't thank him enough for the work that he did with us to do that. And that is a certification that is knowledge-based and hands-on applied knowledge as well. So it's a very, very great credential. And I'm happy to say that the workforce aid students that Cindy was talking about from Spirit, one of the criteria of that grant was that they all are eligible to set for this credential. So we have 70 people right now that are getting ready to set for that credential that have been pre-hired at Spirit. That's a good thing. And the final thing that's even the best news of all, especially to employers in the room, is 140 companies have hired those students that have gone through these programs at these 5 colleges. So that's kind of where we've been. So where do we go from here? Because you got to be thinking. There's the microscope, there's the telescope, where are we headed? So our grant funding for the TAC grant actually ends in 1 year, September 30th of 2016. So we have been working with our partners at the Manufacturing Institute the last several months, trying to figure out how can we build a sustainability plan to take the good work that has started with this TAC grant and the National Aviation Consortium and scale that out. And scale that out to other colleges, to other employers across the United States. How do we do it? And why should we do it? But I think everybody could agree, after what we've heard today, that the need for aviation manufacturing skills remains stronger than ever. And I think, even more importantly, we need to recognize that employers need not just a trained workforce, but they need a reliable trained workforce that they can meet their needs and have their companies be successful. And as educators, we want to be a part of that. So how are we going to do this? One of the things that we've talked about in this business plan as we're working with the Manufacturing Institute is how do we expand the mission and the capabilities of the National Center for Aviation Training? How do we establish the National Center for Aviation Training as an internationally recognized leader in aviation talent development? And how does everybody plug into that? Because, again, remember what Jennifer said to my board, do you want to be local or do you want to be national? How do we connect employers to providers of job-ready talent in outcome-based partnerships? How do we create more partnerships? How do we build upon the things that everybody's doing? And how do we find out that information? How do we come together for the good of industry, both from business and education? How do we provide talent analytics to help us understand what are the attributes of that successful worker? What do they need? What do they look like? You know, how do we attribute the attributes of that so that we know that we're bringing somebody that's not only technically skilled, but they have the other characteristics, call them soft skills, life skills, whatever you want to call them. And then I think clearly we heard this morning, how do we integrate strategic recruiting and strategic initiatives for high schools, middle school, maybe down to 4th grade, and for veterans? So those are the things that we think, need to be built in the business plan. But we want all of you to join us and help us. We want to expand this network that we began with the National Aviation Consortium. And we want to link skilled talent with those that provide it. So there's 3 things that we believe that we really need to do in this business plan, and the rest of it is kind of becoming a blank sheet of paper that we want you to help us fill in. We think that we need to have measurable value for employers. They've got to value what we do. We need to have meaningful jobs for workers. I was reading a book yesterday from the Gallup Association. It was called The Jobs War. And it was so interesting. They did this massive survey, and the one thing that people said across the whole United States of America is, we want a good job. Just fix it. We just want a good job. So how can we do that? So I think that's something we have to do. And then certainly, again, the same thing that we've heard today, and these were already on my list. I just got to tell you, this is so interesting. This has been a very validating morning, is the fact that we have to work really hard together to create a positive brand for careers in aviation and manufacturing. So this business plan, this expansion of the NAC grant, has the opportunity to provide an array of services, an array of opportunities, new programs. What are those new ones? We said these are the 6 we're going to work on 4.5 years ago. What are the next ones we need to work on? Where are the next immediate needs that we need to create accelerated, short-term training, job-ready, industry-recognized credential? So as you're sitting there thinking about your individual organization, whether it's your college, whether it's your company, whether you're a supplier, whether you're an OEM, if you're looking for ways to create profitable employer, educator, and certification opportunities, if you're interested in understanding the economic value, the ROI of career technical education in your hiring processes, if you're wondering how to combine education and industry-recognized credentials, if you're thinking, how do we scope what we've accomplished to date and build upon it? What are the next 6, 7, 8 curriculum areas? If you're interested in recruiting strategically in creative ways high school students for future employees, recreating the branding and the imaging of aviation manufacturing, working on military, looking at STEM, or if you're just simply interested in searching for a trusted forum to share best practices on how we design talent development programs, then you should join us. You should join what we do next, and we would really invite you to do that. We invite you to do it because it's important. We invite you to do it because we've heard today it's important. And we need to do this so that employers across the United States can find and they can fill the need for skilled and qualified workforce. We have to do this. And we have to work together in business and education, I believe, in unprecedented ways that we have never worked like this before. We have to be more creative and more entwined because we need to ensure that our nation continues to lead the free world in job creation, enterprise, and growth of goods and services so that we can continue to be a global economic superpower. And that doesn't come without hard work. And the harder that the dogs are nipping at your heels, the harder we're going to have to work and the faster we're going to have to work. And we have to do it all together because it's better that way. Good things come from that. And everybody wins. So, I want to thank you for listening to me today. I want to challenge each of us to work together to change this issue. I want us to be able to come together in 2 or 3 years and have a new set of problems, whatever those may be. But the issues that we've identified today, we need to go to work on. And I think we can do that collectively and together. And I love the multiplication dance. I love that because I was thinking to myself, that's exactly, okay, we got 5 of us. We got the Manufacturing Institute. Who's coming on next? Where's the next multiplication? Who else wants to dance? And I love that. I really did. I loved it. So I really want to thank you for your time today. I want to thank you for the invitation to speak. And I sincerely ask that you will consider joining us as we move forward to create what are the next steps to build and achieve the aviation and the manufacturing industry for our communities, for our states, and for our nation. Thank you. I would also add that there is a handout for you at the table over here, and this has been creatively produced, and it might be the first time you've ever seen a video brochure. I don't know, it was the first time I'd seen it. And it also has a little charger port, so you can watch this video as many times as you want. All the contact information for everybody is in here. If you want to join us, give us your business card or contact us through here, and share this when you get back home. We thought it might be more exciting for you to share a video brochure than just a regular one. So thank you again.
So we're actually going to now take a quick break and get down to what's next. So this sort of concludes the formal speaking section of our summit today. And as Sheree noted, first off, in handouts that people were given as they walked in the door today, in addition to the program, we have the how-to kit. So for the next hour, for those that are interested, we're actually going to unpack the National Aviation Consortium, because I will say a lot of thought leadership, in addition to the employers sitting at the table, went into the design and construct, and the proof is ultimately in the 160 plus companies that are engaged in hiring the graduates. There were some very purposeful activities, from the accelerated online curriculum content and how we packaged it to be that short-term to long-term, and how it fit in an education pathway, realizing how every community is different, how we tested, broke apart, and put back together the model. We talked at we're a good networking group. We talked at the last peer-to-peer conference about the assumptions, and at that point I could stand before the crowd and say, and the assumptions that I made when I went in with the original design that I presented to Sheree's board, and oh, look what it did to me. Because y'all know when you assume something, what happens. But the point was, we tested the model in a number of different markets, whether it was a maintenance, repair, and overhaul market or a manufacturing market. We tried to break it apart so we could put it back together to pull forward the best of the best. And for, I don't know how many years, Susan, I sat before the AIA Workforce Council and said, okay, we got it, but we're not willing to share it yet, because we really need to deconstruct it and reconstruct it in an environment that can get to national scalability. Because I told this to all of the partners at the front end of the National Aviation Consortium, I didn't sign up to be part of a $15 million grant. I'm so proud at the over 2,500 students that have been served, but in the end, I signed up to put in place a model that would go well beyond impact of $15 million. That was just a means by which I could accomplish the goal of getting to scalability, replicability, and progress on behalf of our nation's aviation manufacturers. So I want to thank all of you for being here today. In the formal part of the program, I'd encourage you to stay for the next session, where we break it apart and go through the what is the it, what are the parts in the box, and how can you act as an individual employer to move to scalability, how can you act as a community to get to scalability, and how can you act as a college to get to scalability. And then what does that mean? And as part of the federal commitment under the National Aviation Consortium is, and then how can the NAC be a resource and support mechanism through the National Aviation Training Center to help support that. So thank you all for being here today, and we'll give it about 5 minutes and then start into the next section. Oh, and I'm sorry, I should never leave stage without an acknowledgement of the people that actually make this happen. So I'd like to take a minute to thank Amir Morgan, the program manager for the National Aviation Consortium at the Institute. She is the one that makes the partnerships run, and Susan Lavrakis from AIA, and go Susan, and our colleagues at Gamma. They truly helped pull the industry voice together here, but also all of the college partners that have been part of this journey. And I see our evaluation partners. You know, we measured and evaluated everything along the way, and the 180 Skills team, and it's been an incredible partnership of success. So we'll look forward to unpacking it in a couple minutes. Thanks.